Oh, you're muted. Oh, you better believe I'm putting this on there. That's a win for me.
You are really like stretching for your
I'm
wins here.
fishing, okay?
That
I'm
that's not
fishing.
that is not even close to mid episode. We'll see. All right, our Patreon will have to see if that one counts. Welcome to the Retic Lounge, everyone. I'm Nathan Katz. You're here with Lucas Begnara as well. Tonight we have a guest on that's going to be talking Burmese pythons and kind of comparing them to Retics. I mean, this is a guest that's going to be able to contrast the two very well. Works with both, and yeah, I'm excited to get into it. But it's someone that I've been following for a long time. Lucas, you too?
Yeah, so I've been following him since I even had an Instagram, and I've been a very big, kind of like behind the scenes fans. I wasn't big on the Burm stuff, but I saw what they were doing with retakes. I maybe had
Mm-hmm.
like back in the day, maybe a conversation or two with him, but always appreciated what they did from afar. And so, um, literally hadn't talked to him like almost ever, and I reached out to him to do our species spotlight on Burmese pythons, and Matt with oh man, drawing
State Pythons?
Peach State Pythons. Sorry. He was kind of literally responded within an hour, and I asked him if he wanted to do an episode, and literally like that second was like absolutely. So we literally like from the day of recording, like only 4 days ago, asked if he would do this. He jumped on and said yes. So I'm excited to have him on.
Yeah,
But yeah,
I think, I mean, I've been following him for a while, and I think even during my first breeding season, I reached out a couple times, and yeah, Matt was always really generous with his time. So really cool to have him on tonight.
I was scratching my shoulder and it did the thumbs up. I need to find a way to
Our
get
our
rid of
audio
this.
listeners need to see these little screen reactions that
They
you've been
do. They
messing around
do.
with. All right.
Um,
Well, let's just shout out our Patreon real quick. We have a really
yeah.
active Discord. We have a great community over there. We do Zoom meetings. We have extra content for you guys. So go over to our Patreon, become a member today, and join our Discord.
One thing we haven't done in a while is we need to start having the people we have on as the guests for our Patreon Zoom meetings.
We need to do that.
I
Yeah.
keep forgetting that we need to do that. So we need to get probably Chris
Steven.
McVicker on, or Steven, or
Yeah.
even, I mean, we can go way back, but yeah. Anyways,
We have a laundry list of people we need to run through on that.
yeah, let's go ahead and bring Matt on here. Matt, what's going on, man?
Not too much, guys. Glad to be here.
Yeah.
And thank you for the kind words there, man. That's nice to hear.
Yeah. No, I mean, your content. I mean, even if no one's gotten the chance to talk to you, your animals speak for themselves, I feel like.
I appreciate that.
Well, you've been doing it a long time in those early morning routines. I was going through some back surgery and stuff at the time. I was
That's
going through
right.
that first breeding, so just seeing you work with the animals, take your health really seriously, that was a big motivator for me. So
That's cool.
thanks.
I do remember that one of the first times we talked, you had back surgery and there was a clutch that needed to be pulled.
Yep.
I remember
Yep.
that, man.
Yeah, it was only a week or two after I had my fusion done. I pulled it. She was good.
Nice.
That sounds
I knew
like
you
a
could.
nightmare. Sounds like a nightmare. Was she nice?
Yeah, she was great.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, couldn't
It's
have asked
always-
for a better experience.
It's always the ones that I'm the most worried about end up being the easiest.
Easiest.
Oh no,
Um,
she's the sweetest year round. I haven't ever had a problem with her. It's weird.
I get like nervous with like the F1 stuff, and every single time, like I pulled the clutch from the Solaire and then the Philippine, I had to wait 2 days because I was out of town. Not a single one of them like even struck, budged. Yeah, it's always the ones that I just need to like constantly be stressed before I pull eggs, and it'll go well.
It's good strategy.
Yeah.
But Matt, love
Yes.
the support for USARK and the shirt that you got on right there.
Absolutely. Got a rep.
Yeah, is that one of the old school shirts? I feel like that one's been around for a minute.
Yeah. This is I don't know if we'd go as far as say retro, but yeah, it's a few years old.
Okay. If you don't mind, kind of do the cliche introduction, who you are, all that good stuff. Give our listeners a little snapshot on, when you got into snakes, what you kept growing up, all that good stuff. Whether you're just getting into retics or you've been breeding for years, the first place you want to visit is Stewart Design. More and more breeders keep showing up at shows, on Morph Market, and are all over social media. Sometimes it may feel possible to get anyone's attention. Stewart Designs helps small businesses like yours do big things through brand clarity, helping entrepreneurs to start and scale businesses that are easy to know and love. Their work can help any company or industry, but they've done a ton of work for ours. Stewart Design created the brands for USARK, Canova, Reach Out Reptiles, Coiled, and dozens of other well-known reptile breeders. Like many of us, the owner of Stewart Design, Blake, is a keeper and breeder who fell in love with Retics through first working with Garrett Hartle. Although Stewart Design does a lot of corporate work, Blake has a passion for working with people in the reptile industry. Stewart Design can help if you're just getting started or you're ready to take things to the next level. You're struggling to stand out and build your presence online or at shows. You don't want to be like the other guys or get lost in the crowd, and you want to make your own way doing what you love. And also, you have big ideas and know your business is special, but you need help sharing it with the reptile community. If something here resonates with you, reach out to Blake and have a conversation. To learn more or get started, visit stewartdesignbrands.com or call them at 855-SD-LOGOS. Clear brands own markets. Stewart Design helps create them. If you are in the market for an enclosure for your reticulated python or any other one of your reptiles, Focus Cubed Habitats is your one-stop shop for not only the best-looking cages on the market, but also provide amazing features and add-ons to your cages. We partnered with Focus Cubed Habitats because they continue to innovate and change the way we house our animals unlike any other caging company out there. Their cages are designed intelligently and provide the most stylish and secure housing for your animals' comfort and well-being. Visit focuscubedhabitats.com for your animals' caging needs. Again, visit focuscubedhabitats.com for some amazing and stylish enclosures.
We also want to thank VivTech Products for being an affiliate sponsor of the TheReticLounge. Stop by VivTech Products for the best UV spectrum lighting on the market that will enhance and improve your snake's overall well-being and health. Visit VivTechProducts.com and use the code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off. Again, visit VivTechProducts.com and use our affiliate code ReticLounge23 today for 15% off.
Looking for the perfect accessories for your hatchlings or juvenile retics? Look no further than HeliGuy Serpents. Our sponsor, Chris Sexton, is coming in hot with an amazing 3D printer, creating top-notch perches and other caging accessories for your beloved pets. Enrich your retics environment with their high-quality products. Use our promo code TRL10 for a 10% discount on your purchase. Visit them today at HeliGuySerpents.com and start giving your pets the best. HeliGuy Serpents, the premier source for 3D printed caging accessories. Again, that's www.heliguyserpents.com and use our promo code TRL10 for 10% off all of your 3D printed accessories today.
Okay, cool. So I'm like you said, Matt Bowers. I have PeachStatePythons. Been doing this probably like most people you have on here a lot of my life. We start at the beginning. So I would say, yeah, I guess it started when I was a kid. You know, you like dinosaurs, and that kind of, as you evolved and matured to a very mature 5-year-old, you start to like the reptiles. But I think like the big, like, I don't know, it's kind of hard to put a finger on why we like reptiles. But I lived in Alaska from 5 years old to 9 years old. There's no reptiles. And so I liked dinosaurs, and that kind of grew to like any type of animal, but just had this fascination, interest in reptiles. And then we moved from Alaska to Georgia, and we moved into this apartment complex, and it was on a golf course, and there's a creek that ran through it. And just kind of getting out, exploring a little bit, I saw a frog jump in the creek, and it like blew my mind because there's no reptiles in Alaska. And then I saw that frog, so I looked for it, and then I saw a turtle, and I just absolutely lost my mind. And I realized that you could just turn over rocks and logs and catch these things. And it just kind of got in my blood to go find them, to play with them, to learn about them. And I just totally geeked out on it. And then like we had the apartment complex and the golf course, and on the other side was a shopping center that had a pet store in it, and they had a lot of exotics, the lizards, the snakes of all kinds. So I could walk over there and just hang out in there for hours, and then just really, I don't know. I mean, as much as you guys like them, it's hard to say what we like about them, but it just, I never grew out of it. Now as a 41-year-old man, still have them, but it just, all throughout like elementary school, I would I would check out any book we had on reptiles and just study it. And it's weird because I'm not like I don't want to say I'm not a very studious guy. I don't want to say I'm not a smart guy, but I was able to, in 4th grade, within like the first 3 months of being in that school, they had the North American Field Guide Audubon North American Guide to Reptiles, and I memorized every snake and every lizard in there.
That's
just from the picture. I knew where it lived, what habitat, and like I said, it wasn't like I was proactively studying. I just like, what's that? And you flip to the back and, oh, it lives here, and you just learn about it. Anyway, I can still visualize that the northern pine snake in that book. With the high whites is like a New Jersey pine snake. Anyways, yeah, just never grew out of it.
That's bringing me back to like my zoo books days. So I like that.
Oh, I had zoo books for sure.
Yeah.
Just I don't know why I kept being this draw to reptiles. And then, so I lived in a town in Georgia. It's called Peachtree City, and for some reason that it's centered around golf courses. So there's golf cart paths throughout the town. Like people drive golf carts to the grocery store. Kids drive golf carts to school. It's everybody gets around on golf carts. So at like that 5th, 6th grade is when I started venturing out on the bike. And that's when I got my first exposure to road cruising, but we were on the cart paths, and you just be driving and riding your bike. And then there'd be a rat snake laying across the road. So you dump the bike, go chase it down, get it, and take it home. And luckily my parents were okay with it. I want to say supportive, but they weren't like, go get you another, Matt. But if I did bring one home, they would be like, all right, well, let's get it a cage. And then if I brought another one home, they'd be like, okay, you got to let one go if you're going to keep this one. So they let me always kind of have some. And, there was a time in 5th grade, I believe it was, I'd caught a garter snake and brought it home. And a couple days later, walking by the cage, there's like 20 baby garter snakes just crawling around. So I caught a gravid garter snake.
Oh,
did we lose him?
And then eventually
I was so excited to hear about the baby garter snakes.
Me too, man.
Get into that.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Real quick, hands up. Okay. I want to, you kind of drop reception right after you said you caught a gravid garter snake.
Oh, okay.
So what did you say right after that? Or can I even interject right there and be like, what the hell? How was that? What did you do?
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. So it's just, So we just kind of played with them and let them go in the backyard.
Awesome.
So that was really cool. And so what I said, there's just like little experiences like that. I'd caught a king snake and brought it home, and like a couple months later it laid eggs. So I apparently caught a gravid king snake. So just little things like that kind of kept me hooked and just never outgrew it. And
you've always had a knack for being able to breed these animals, huh?
Oh yeah, even or like the accidentally breeding.
Just find the good ones.
Right. Yeah. Shorten the whole breeding process down and get you a gravid out in the wild. But don't keep natives in Georgia. I have to put that disclaimer out there. In the 90s, we did what we wanted, but not now.
Yeah.
But so
same in Florida. Don't do that.
So but anyways, we just and that's just kind of how it started. And it kind of snowballs from that. You just catch one, then all of a sudden you have these babies, and I don't, and again, I still can't put my finger on why, but I just absolutely love it and just never grew out of it. And then we're gonna get into the Burmese Python stuff, but that's really what started and ramped up the whole breeding process, is because when I got into the Burms, you couldn't ship them. The Lacey Act was in effect, so you're limited to what's in Georgia. And I just kind of started going on a mission and trying to get enough to where I could kind of revive the Burmese Pythons in Georgia. And then by the time I'd done that a couple of years, they opened up the Lacey Act, and it was game busters from there.
Yeah. I bet that was a good feeling. I wasn't breeding or doing anything during that time, and I bet once they kind of lifted the interstate commerce, I bet that felt great.
Yeah, it was huge. And it's weird because I want to say I knew they would, but I have no reason to think they would open it back up.
There was a big
So
feeling at that time, though, that it would, because I had
yeah.
just bought my first super dwarf right before, and
Oh, no
then it
kidding.
opened up. Yeah.
That long ago. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, just
Well, I think so, or maybe it was the second Lacey ban.
yeah. Well, regardless, like there was just something that just made me feel like they're going to open this up. We're going to be able to do this. But at the time, you had to be pretty strategic in what you're doing because you have to have this mindset of like, okay, whatever you produce, you have to be able to sell in Georgia. So you got to make sure it's good stuff. You got to make sure it's varied stuff, right? Can't have too many duplicates because it's going to be
Right.
harder to move. And then there's only so much you could produce in a state. And at that time, Georgia didn't have a lot. What you would see at that time is different states would be either like depleted or saturated, and there's nothing you could do about it. So at the time, I would sell my hypos like 750, like that. But there might be, I remember in Maryland, this guy was breeding really well and he'd done it for a while and he was selling it for 250, 300. It's the same snake, but you just couldn't get them in Georgia. So people wanted them. So it's neat to see that kind of like nuance of depends on what state you're at.
Right.
But then it just like they opened it up and that's when things got real fun because then you weren't just limited to kind of what you did. You were able to grab lines from other people and do some
Yeah.
really fun stuff.
Yeah, crazy times, man, and I'm kind of glad that I didn't have to go through that transition, but at the same time, it's really cool to see. And I mean, even just talking about the difference in markets between, like, I could
Right.
when there were threats going around during the what was it, Competes Act,
Hmm.
a couple years ago when that happened, or I remember. I'm a locality enthusiast with Retics, and so I started Texas locality or Texas Retic locality page on Facebook, not to like get the group popping and going, but I literally just wanted everybody who had Retics on there. I wanted to
Just
get an
in
account
case.
I wanted to get an account of what localities we have in this state. That
Mhm.
was what was the most important to me. So
It's
yeah,
pretty smart, actually.
I could imagine if yeah, because that was at the time where I was thinking to myself, like, I'm going to start making power moves and start, if we're missing a bunch of available localities, like, and no one's going to jump on this, like, I might have to.
You're like,
Right, that's pretty
my
smart.
garage is starting to look good. Is that around the time you moved down there?
Yep. 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 It was a few months after.
Because that's what. So in that time, there was
I'm gonna switch over. Can you pull up his Instagram because there's a picture of
Yeah,
a hypo.
it's pulled up over
okay,
here. So
let me go ahead and bring that up. But you have a picture of a hypo in a soaking tub that just looks insane.
in a soaking tub.
Yeah, it's in a bin. But anyways, keep
Oh
going.
yeah,
I'm
I think I know
sorry.
what you're talking about. Yeah, no. Yeah, thank you. Visual aid is good for the visual learners out there. But anyways, the point being is I ended up finding one randomly. It was like there was a pet store and they had it on their page. So I went there, their Facebook page, and I was browsing around. They're like, hey, look for these specific. I was like, well, I thought I saw a hypo here. It's like, well, it's sold, but maybe not. But let me call somebody. And they ended up saying, hey, it's available. Do you want it? And I was like, yeah, let me pay for it right now. And the Lacey Act affected things so much that it was alleged that it was one of 2 hypos in the state. And I still have, so I got that in 2015. So that's when I got my first Burm. And I still have the receipt where I purchased it because it was just one of those things where you were looking for something and kind of scrounging around, you find it and you get it and you make it happen. And then that's going to how that got me to breeding. There was one of 2 hypos in the state. And I ended up getting one of them. It was a male. And then they had an albino there that was a female. And I was like, all right, well, what kind of deal can we work? And that's just kind of where it took off, is like, we need to get these Burms back to the forefront in Georgia because nobody was really working with them. So they were around, but nobody was doing anything with them. So I just kind of took it as like this opportunity to really make, I don't know, these just really nice, sweet, pleasant snakes, and just make them kind of popular again. They just seem like they kind of get passed around and nobody was really doing anything with that snake.
Right.
So that's kind of how it got going.
We're trying to find the hypo here. Wait and let us know when we find it. But I could have sworn there was a big one that I saw in a tub somewhat recently. But yeah, because the hypos, man, they look they kind of have like this blue hue to them almost. And where is it? Don't tell me I'm tripping. I swear I saw it. Unless I scrolled that far down.
Yeah,
sometimes you get lost on that page. You just keep going.
That's what I'm saying. That's why your page is.
I've always had some of the best pictures. That's why I've always loved it.
Right. I've been there. There we go. Right there. That middle one.
Yeah.
Is that what's that?
Oh yeah. So that gets into, so that technically, for all intents and purposes, is the hypo leopard.
Okay. Let's
talk
about leopard.
Okay, we can dive into that. But that also, there is kind of going along the same like whole mission I was on, and we can get into the leopard. But just sidebar to come back to and tie it all in later. I had stumbled upon in Georgia this like neon hypo that looked like no hypo I'd ever seen, and so that lineage tied in with the leopard lineage is how you come up with that infamous hypo leopard, which is she's had 2 clutches for me, so her lineage is out there floating around as well. But
it was that picture that I saw a few weeks back when I was kind of scrolling through that I was like, do I need to get into Burms? Should I get into Burms? And I don't know. Me and Nathan have like loved this species spotlight segment that we're doing, but also one thing that we've realized is like it's opening up a can of worms for a lot of species now that we're really enjoying talking about. But
and I wouldn't have retics without Burms.
Right. My first experience with a big snake was a Burm, and I fell in love with them, and I always liked retics from afar, but I was lucky enough that my parents were like, hey, yeah, we can get you a Burm. And I was only like 8 at the time. I was like, cool.
No way.
Yeah. Snakes on Sunset in Florida. That's where I got it from. And, but yeah. And then, then I was like, oh, retics. And back then, even when I was a kid researching them, retics were the mean ones. Right.
Right.
But I had always wanted a retic. So, you were talking about kind of the leopard and then the hypo stuff. So I kind of want to give you the freedom to kind of keep going in that direction of that conversation that you were going into. Sorry, I interrupted.
No. And it might be better for you to direct because I'll go off.
Yeah. So, I mean,
because that's my jam.
one thing that I have actually, let's segue into what the hell happened in Georgia recently, because then I'll get
Okay.
into the projects you're working. So I kept seeing a lot of posts and people commenting on your posts that like, man, it's so shitty that you can't kind of continue on with this project and this stuff that you were doing and getting to sell them and put them out there. And so I started doing some digging, started seeing some of the projects you were working with. But can you kind of inform us like what's happening in Georgia, or is it just a few counties, or what's happening?
Okay. So they have there's a few species that are no longer allowed in the state of Georgia as of midnight tonight, actually. So December 4th. Burmese pythons, Nile monitors, there's a turtle, Chinese helmeted turtle, maybe, and and black and white tegus. And I think that's it. But they are no longer allowed in Georgia. This passed so this is the whole state. Georgia DNR, Department of Natural Resources, passed this, and it started December of last year. They were no longer allowed. But what they did is they gave a year, I guess a little less than a year grace period to sell your animals, get rid of your animals, figure out what you're doing. If you currently have the animals, you can give them microchip, pit tagged, and then registered with the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. So it's essentially they call it a wild animals license, but there is an actual like wild animals license that you have to get inspection, all this. But they basically just kind of made this like for reptiles segment. But basically, yeah, so you can no longer have them unless you had them prior and they were registered in time. All breeding and like I guess importation into the state was no longer allowed as of December 22, and then as of midnight tonight is Dunzo.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
retics aren't lumped into that?
No, and so no.
That
what's
kind of
good-
catches me off guard.
Well, yeah. So what makes me feel better about it, it's hard for me to say. The reasoning behind the berms, it's berms and the Indians as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any here, but is allegedly there is a lung parasite they can have, and and if they get out, they might pass that parasite on to an eastern indigo, which is I don't know,
protected.
threatened, endangered. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it could cause problems with them. So whereas objectively it might be a reach, I've looked very hard to
It's a
find an indigo,
reach.
and I've never found one. But my Burmese python that might escape and get out might find his own. I don't know, but it's not for me to speak on. There's probably a lot of science backing it, but at least it's not like this snake's big and scary, so we're banning it. There's actually some scientific purpose to preserve, this Georgia Department of Natural Resources.
At the very least, on the surface, there's a scientific reason for it.
Right.
But yeah,
it's a little better.
It's better than these snakes can kill and eat a 6-foot human. It's better than that.
Right. And I think like the tegus, there might be proof that they can actually survive and breed and establish populations.
Oh, they would love to brumate up in Georgia.
Okay, yeah. So
they're already in Florida taking over. So I can imagine the concern there. Like I get it. I'm not for banning animals, but Florida has a problem, and southern part of Georgia isn't too much different than the northern part of Florida. Now they have cold winters, but animals like tegus, they do brumate. So they are capable of living in cooler weather. I mean, it gets cold as hell in Argentina. So they're capable of it, but yeah, I just I hate to see it happen, and I hate to see it happen when there's people like you that are leading industries, especially in specific states, that have to call it quits by not of choice, right? Like if someone throws in the towel, or they have family, or they're at their point where I don't know, maybe like someone like Bob Clark when he's 90, he'll decide to stop breeding, right? Like those type of people that having a choice is one thing, but being told by your government is, regardless of the reason why, it's a shitty thing. So I'm sorry to hear that, man.
Yeah,
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I always try to accept those shifts as getting you to something that you'll find that is probably more fulfilling than you'll ever would have known had you been sticking with the berms, you know. And
Retics.
maybe retics, you know, who knows what it'll do. You know, maybe I'll get into beta fish. I don't know.
At this point, let's go beta fish.
Right.
Right?
Right.
They're pretty cool.
Oh man, I was at the pet store today down the road, and they had like probably about like 5 dozen of them that were beautiful. My daughter wanted one so bad, and I was like, "Yeah, your mom's gonna kill me if we bring another animal in the home, so let's wait."
So I went to a species spotlight. I went to a beta fish show, and it was one of the
Oh,
coolest
so
things
you're
I've
not
ever been
joking?
to.
This is awesome.
I
Let's
so
keep
I
digging
actually
into this.
I actually won't get into it, but just to touch on your point, it was actually pretty cool. So we just kind of went, and we thought it was like a show where you go by, but it was actually like a competition, and so you learn all the classifications of them. And we spent hours, and it was a little hotel room. I mean, it was small. I don't see myself getting into beta fish, but I can acknowledge that they're actually pretty neat. So
Right. I like them. Like some of the ones that were there today, they were there's one that was black and red, and the outlines of like their big fin on the back, like their big the like lion's mane that they have for their tails or whatever you want to call them, was outlined in just silver. It was so damn cool.
That's pretty cool.
But anyway, so with that being said about you not being able to breed them anymore, or sell them or whatever the case may be, actually, real quick before we get into your projects that you're working on, what happens if you have a female have a partho or stored sperm, and they do have a clutch? Like, what happens in that aspect? Do you have to report it? Do you have to get them tagged? Do you throw the eggs away? I guess.
So I would say if anybody finds themselves in that position, it's best to consult your closest Georgia DNR rep. But I would say so it's always good to let them know ahead of time would be my suggestion. I have some relations with an FWC, and just talking about some of the regulations. You always want to let it be disclosed first. I don't know what they would make you do with it, the DNR. Like, would they make you throw it away? Would they raise an eyebrow like, "Oh yeah, partho, how convenient"? I don't know, but it would
happens,
be best
man.
to be
Way more common than you think.
Well, yeah, like mine was, retained sperm. I hadn't paired her in a year, and so it does happen. And so I would say it'd always be best to tell them when it comes out, and not hatch them and see what's in there and then tell them.
Right. I guess that makes
sense. That was a good rule of thumb.
And I guess it is a choice to go ahead and turn on the incubator, set up a box, put the eggs in right, because at that point you're
made a lot of
expecting
decisions.
life, right?
Yep.
So I guess now that we're talking about that, it shouldn't really be that big of a concern.
Right.
But yeah, that makes total sense. Now, back to your projects. What are you most known for, or what is your biggest highlight in when you work with berms? Like what is something that you would really, I guess, want to talk about in terms of things that you've really worked in deeply?
Okay. I would like to say I'm most known for, so like where I went with things was, and I'm most known probably for leopard. But to unpack that a little more and how kind of leopard came about and why I pursued that appearance of a snake is just like I talked about earlier. I love the normals. I'm all about the normals, but I wanted what I loved was the opportunity to manipulate the pattern of a normal while still keeping it a normal.
Right.
So like my whole pursuit was making crazy looking normals, and then you sprinkle a little color in there with the hypo. But really trying to avoid making a visual morph mutation, but just working with what those can provide to your canvas. But ultimately, I'm probably known for the leopard stuff, which is just a term that's been thrown out there. And then so I think on the screen is I have stumbled upon this incredibly bright neon glowing hypo.
Is that
that's just yes, I believe that's yep. So that's one of them. And
I think it's nuts. I want that.
It doesn't look real.
Like I don't
Yeah, thank you.
have any desire to breed Burmese pythons, but I want that as a pet.
Right. And I
Like-
get that a lot. Like I just want that as an animal.
Even this normal, I was looking at this just a
Oh,
second
dude,
ago when you were
Oh, yeah.
saying that.
Normal
Yeah.
berms are some of the best looking snakes out there. You
Right.
know what? Before we get into that whole thing, do you have any Florida pythons?
From my understanding, that would be illegal. So
Okay, fair, fair.
just from my understanding.
Okay,
I
fair.
do know that you
I didn't know that. That was
you
a little
herp a little
ignorant there,
bit.
but
Have you herped around Florida in hopes of finding a berm?
So I've been in Florida at times looking for snakes, and I have, with my eyes, seen them.
Yeah.
They're there. I don't think they're as. So I would say probably not a reach to say I've spent 100 hours herping in the Everglades area.
awesome.
Not so much in the park side, but kind of that other side. And I've seen seen 4
Okay.
Awesome.
in
I-
100 hours.
Oh
So-
wow. I
So not a lot, not like
Yeah.
what they're trying to make it look like.
oh
Not-
no.
and I've
no,
been
no,
in
no.
spots where
crossing
they
your
are.
street in the
Right.
Yeah.
in the cul-de-sac or whatever.
No, and I mean I think, and I don't even know how true this is. Someone said that they found one as north as Naples, which if you're not familiar with Florida, Naples is on the other. No, it's I guess on the same
Mhm.
coastline, but it's about 2 hours north of the Everglades, and
No, I'd say it's parallel. It's just the other
or
side of the
it's
state.
on the other side. Okay, so it is
Yeah.
on the west coast.
So
then.
Everglades
Okay.
is the elbow.
What's funny is I'm from Florida and I'm over here. Not even
because I've spent a lot of time in Naples, so that's why I know.
But I grew up camping in the Everglades. I was in Boy Scouts and
kidding.
I lived in Miami for 7 years, and I was the weird one who, whenever we would see a gator, I wanted to get closer.
Right. That's me.
Yeah, me. Exactly. Okay, let's get back to kind of leopard. What is leopard? Why is it legit? And you know, is leopard essentially, is it a het green?
Right. It's lots to unpack there. Simple question with really
A simple question with
vast background. So ultimately, okay, so when I started getting the berms, so at the time there was essentially 4 mutations, right? So you have albino, granite, patternless green, which is the same, and then labyrinth. And that was really it. I think there were some caramels around at the time, but you didn't have a lot of morphs. And so with Burmese pythons, when you take 2 genes, 2 visual recessives, oh, and there's hypo, sorry, hypo left, that's a big one, hypo, and hypo is codominant. The rest are recessive. So when you take these 2 genes together,
whoa, hold up. Hypo is an incomplete dominant or codominant?
yes, yep.
Okay,
So
cool.
it makes, if you've heard of the ivory, it
Yes.
makes an ivory.
Cool.
Yep. So when you take a granite, if you visualize what a granite is, then you take an albino, it looks exactly what you can visualize, right? So like if you think of where Retic guys, like Motley Tiger, like Motley looks this way, Tiger looks like this. You put them together, it looks like something different, right? All of a sudden there's green and silver in there. Like I don't know where those colors came from, right? So you don't have that in the berms. You don't have this like connection of genetics that makes this new looking thing, like, or take like a cow in Retics, right? Like where did that come from between the Phantom and the Head Orange Ghost Stripe, right? So
Right.
I was like, I don't know, and then I got drawn to the different looking normals. So getting to the point, as you're just browsing around the internet and looking around, there was this one snake that popped up that is just reduced pattern, very circular pattern, just real clean, and it brings out the colors because it's bringing out those side patterns. Anyways, it just had this connotation next to it and basically said leopard. And so I just fell in love with that look of the snake and just loved leopard. And if it's got a name, it's got to be something. And you know, fast forward, I don't know, a year or so, a like legit full blown leopard pops up available. And I didn't get it at the time, but I knew the guy who had it and he sold it to somebody else who I ended up knowing. And first he had a clutch with it, and then he got rid of it. So I became friends with the other guy, and he's actually still a good friend now. And I was like, hey man, if you ever want to get rid of that snake, let me know. And he's like, dude, I've watched this snake for 10 years. And come to find out, that snake was purchased at the Daytona show in the late 90s. So this thing's been around a minute. And anyways, it's just like textbooks, circular patterns. And a couple of things happened, and I ended up having an opportunity to get it. And I just knew deep down that it was something, right? And it matched that leopard pattern. So what people say that leopard is they say it's just het green. And so
sorry if I triggered you there.
No. That's no, it's dead on. Yeah, right. And so it's weird, because that's fine if that's what it is, but when it's not just het green, because it looks incredible. And I've produced clutches from an albino green female, so that means every baby's 100% het green, and they don't look like that. So it's got to be something else. And I knew deep down, like, this is something. We got to find out what this is, and I can produce this. I can reproduce this. And really what I wanted to do is just make things that looked different than what we're seeing. Like, how many albino granites and albino greens and green granites can be out there when you're not really getting any more depth to these animals? You're just reproducing these simple combos. So we got to like start digging in and see what else can be there.
You start to breed for phenotypic expression, right?
Exactly.
Exactly. And that see, it's crazy that it took it took Burmese pythons this long to get to. It's taken Retic this long to get to. But the thing is, most of the people that I saw on comments that are saying like, oh, leopard is just het green, are the people who are in the ball python industry who call anything everything.
Right. There's like 5 different fires.
Right.
Yep.
It's the Dinker Project.
Right.
That's
exactly.
right. Yep.
Don't get me wrong. For those of you that breed ball pythons, like, much respect. I actually like what they're doing by naming the subtle differences different if it's replicable through selective breeding, right? Like, that's smart. Right? Like, I keep telling like Shane Costello in the Retic world, I said, stop calling your shit Sunfires and call them Shane Fires. Like, stop. Like,
exactly.
call them something different, because they look completely different.
They look different.
Anyways, sorry, that was my rant of the episode. Go for it.
No, that was great. And I welcome those rants, because that was a perfect example of kind of how this became something. So as I started working with it, and hey, look at this leopard, and I'm going to breed leopards. You hear this, it's just het green. And there wasn't a ton of pushback until I produced the first clutch, and there were leopards in it. And so then I started calling them leopards. And the people who pushed back the most were what I would call, old school people who have been breeding a while. And that was the weirdest thing to me, because what if this is in fact a thing? I've just depthened what we can do with these animals that you're trying to breed. So it's weird. It's like they only wanted to be in this, like, we only have 5 genes and that's it. We're not doing anything else. It was weird, because it helps every Burm breeder out if we kind of discover another little notch we can work with. But it's so weird. But all the main people who are pushing back aren't around anymore. So I don't know the correlation there.
I'm waiting for that day in Retic.
So it's like but what they would do is it's just interesting. So this is kind of how leopard became kind of bigger for me. Is they hated it or were bothered by it so much. I don't mean to use negativity, but they were bothered by it so much they would at times, the word I want to use is maybe antagonize or whatever, but they might make a post and be like, hey, Matt, look at this leopard. And they're being really sarcastic. And they would post a very minutely reduced pattern green or het green. And I'd be like, oh, beautiful snake. But I wouldn't necessarily call it a leopard. Here's more of what a leopard likes. And I'd drop a pic. And then all of a sudden my inbox would be like, hey, you got any more of those? Hey, how much are those? Can you sell? So like all these people who were trying to, make me look dumb were just advertising for me, because you could now see the difference in what it does in those comments. So
I'm taking notes right now, man. That is beautiful.
It's like, it was every time, man. But getting back to what leopard is, so it reduces the pattern, and objectively it is we can get into it as I progress through explaining it, and touching on this last clutch. It does appear to be associated with green. And so you're just, what's really fun about this, and this is what can really keep you engaged, what really kind of sucks about the legislation, but like, it takes so long to figure out what's going on that it's so much fun. And then like each time you do a pairing, you learn a little more, and then you get somewhere and then it slugs out and it's just like devastating, but then you
Right.
push a little harder and then you get it. And so it's just like all these highs and lows that are just so much fun.
Sounds like
that it
breeding
makes even-
snakes.
Yes, it sounds
Yeah,
exactly
for
like
real.
breeding snakes, right? Like that, you have to have that really crappy, sucky blow, because then when you do hit it, it's that much better. But anyways, getting back to it, so it did appear to be reducing the pattern. There was some type of color association with it where it seemed to brighten the colors. And it's just something I wanted to go further. And so I had rounded up the leopard, and I had rounded up that like neon hypo and paired them, and leopard stuff popped out. And then these crazy colored hypos popped out, but it wasn't like 50-50. And then just other odd stuff came out of that clutch that I couldn't really put my finger on. There was some really, really, really dark, like melanistic looking animals in there. There were some busy patterns. It was just like, things were weird and weird.
Are there any of those dark ones on your Instagram?
You'd have to go back to 2017, but there are.
Jeez. Okay.
I'll try. So Lucas,
Nathan,
switch to the other screen,
I'm
and
gonna
then
switch
I'll
to the other screen so we don't all get a headache.
Go back.
I'll
But
start going.
so that the way that came out in that clutch, you just couldn't put your finger on what it was, and so all you're still thinking it is this circular pattern, like that hypo you showed earlier. She is that circular
hypo,
pattern, right?
My favorite thing that I've seen, and you could tell me if I'm wrong or not. A lot of the leopard patterning that I see, what I see a lot of is it brings out a lot of blushing, or is that the hypo side of things?
So that would be the leopard. So if you get just a standard,
I love it.
So it's on both ends, right? So
right.
The normal leopard, you'll see a lot of the blushing, and the other thing it does, which I don't see a lot of berms doing, when I have this leopard and when I have those hypos that I'm working with, you get the firing up and firing down like you get in the retics. Like a retic can look totally different.
Oh, no,
yeah.
Fired up or fired out.
It's
It's
weird.
insane.
You can have a normal retic on fire that looks completely anery, and then when it's normal, it looks like a brown snake.
And unless you've seen it, you don't understand the significance of that swing.
Right.
In the fired up, fired down, which I don't see in any other animal that I have, but those leopards have that, and not to that degree, but like that hypo that you showed, like she can be like have that blue bright silver, and then other times she can be darker and then the yellows pop out. So that is something that kind of came with it. And so touching on that, what is leopard? Is it just the circular pattern, or is there more to it? And one of the guys who really hated leopard, he had worked with it allegedly like in, I don't know, 1964 or whatever. He was old school. It's probably like early 90s, but he's the one that really set the standard of like, it's just het green, because allegedly he worked with it and nothing came of it. So a lot of the people who said it's just het leopard have never worked with it or tried. They had just heard. So one of the things I used to say is like, if everybody's copying off the same paper, it doesn't mean that paper's right. It could be the wrong answer and everybody has it. Unless you guys are working with it, unless you can say, hey, here's the results of my breeding. I don't know that I can buy into it. I got to keep trying this. So anyways, his idea was, okay, so it's not the green portion, it's the main lineage of that animal. So let's call it a Bowers, the Bowers line, the Bowers lineage that allows hets to push through. So it may not necessarily be the het green side, but it's just that animal's bloodline in general. Okay. Which was a neat concept, because if you look at that first clutch, they were all over the place, just extreme looking animals. So again, you're still trying to figure out what it is, but that circular pattern we have recreated, and there was green, so there's definitely something to do with green. So then the next year, that was 17, I paired again in 18, riding this high, crushing it. There's this weird weather pattern that came through that year. We had 2 feet of snow, which I lived in Georgia 15 years. If you add up every year of snow, it doesn't add up to 2 feet.
When was this, like 2020?
This was 2018. 2018. Mm-hmm. And then it got up to like 70, and then it dropped into single digits, and then it got up to 70 again. It was crazy. Well, anyways, I had these sick pairings. I was throwing labyrinth to the leopard. I was doing all this crazy stuff. I got 80 slugs that year. I produced no animals. And it was like,
That's
it
a
hurt.
heartbreak.
It hurt. And like, it's frustration. It's, did I let myself down? But I really wanted, I was like, please tell me I made a mistake. Please, because then I can correct it, right? If it's just random, that's tough to swallow. If I effed up, great. Well, I'll fix that and do better.
Right. That's the way
so-
our human psyche kind of works. It's if we have a reason, we feel like control, right? That's like what
Right.
we always control
Right.
equals safety, and our ability to kind of, be able to manipulate our environment as if we're in control. So that, like, if I'm wrong, if I did something wrong, I can fix it, right? But if it was just a shitty year, then that really sucks. It's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Can I just let that sink in? That was deep.
I'm a
That's
therapist.
that's gonna help me through life, there, man.
I'm
Nice.
I'm a therapist.
That was
He gives
very
free bits of
profound.
therapy here and there throughout our episodes.
Every once in a while, I charge.
Boom,
But
man.
If you're
that's
ever hurting,
why-
maybe you'll hear something in Lucas's words.
That was impressive. Yeah. So yeah, and that was, but also, you kind of talk yourself into like, okay, we're gonna use this, and I'm gonna be talking, and it's crazy because at the time I was like, one of the ways I got through it, like trying to be positive, was like, there's gonna be a time later down the road where I speak of 2018 as the year that made me, and here I am on a podcast talking about it. But that's just an example of like how, if you're working a project, it can be delayed.
right.
It wasn't just one animal, it was all of them. And then I talked to people. I have a buddy who breeds, he's like 45 minutes away, and all of his large constrictors slugged out that year, all the way over. I talked to people all the way over to Charleston, and they did large constrictors and monitors, and they're slugged out too, even in the lizards. And he had been doing it a while ago in Charleston. He's like, every now and then a front will come through that just wipes out the breeding season. So I don't know if there's any truth to that, but it made me feel, I can't tell if it made me feel better. I'd rather it be a mistake, but at least I'm in good
Right.
company. But then you go to 19, and I kind of gave the girls a year off because I'd bred them 2 years in a row. And with the slug out, as always, seems to be hard on them. So going to 2020, I now have a male from that Leopard Clutch that had grown up, and he's ready. Bred him to just this crazy looking normal female that had alleged hets, right? And I got 12 eggs, and he is het green. She's het green. So out of 12, Punnett Square guys, how many greens should I get on a recessive?
Yeah, you should.
4?
25, right?
Yep.
Yeah, 25.
Yep.
Exactly.
So
25.
4. So that means I should probably have 4 greens, 4 leopards, 4 other line green, and none, right?
Matt, real
Go
quick,
ahead.
I'm gonna pull up an animal that's dark. If you can let us know if it's the one that
Let's
you're
see.
referring to in the conversation.
That's actually a really light one. It was dark.
Oh,
So
geez.
see how the
Okay,
sides of that
we're
one
off.
are. So
Oh, here,
what
I'll
it
pull
does,
it
that's a
back
good
up.
example. So the saddles are real saturated,
Yeah.
and then the
It
sides are
almost looks
real
like a red
light.
tail boa pattern. It's
Right.
crazy.
Yeah,
Like it
so
just
that's-
blushes out.
That's part of like the weirdness that came out of that clutch.
Yeah,
That's the leopard you're talking about?
So that one is so that one is, that's on the line of like what you might call leopard. But as I progress through this really long explanation, at the end you'll tie in of what that is actually a leopard. But I have to give the suspense and the whole storyline.
That's okay. I love it.
But so of that 12 clutch, so I don't post my clutches until they hatch. So
Is
I
that
never, like,
is
tell
that a
anyone.
superstition thing? Is that
It's just flying to the radar. You never know what I'm doing.
gotcha? Okay.
And then so I always let them, like, a couple come out, so then I know like kind of how to like hype it up or whatever. But so nobody knew of this Burm clutch. I hadn't had one since 17, and it's the first year I have the second generation leopard going to a non-related, and I get 9 greens out of 12. I crush these
Yeah,
odds
those
that I
odds are-
never
that's
wanted to
75%.
crush. Right. I never wanted that. I never wanted a green at all. And I get all these greens. So I can't even talk about it because all the people who don't believe in leopard are gonna be like, see, you didn't get a leopard, but my leopard's covered up by visual green.
Right, because
So you
it
can't
became
even see
visual.
it. Right. So like I didn't really say much about that clutch. I kind of slid some out. If somebody like, hey, everything available, just kind of like move them out.
Right.
Hung on to a couple visual greens that looked pretty neat. Anyway, so now, I start this thing in 16. We're at 2020. I still don't have I have one clutch to show for it, but nobody's believing in it but me, which is fine because I'm doing it for me. But so then the next year, the hypo leopard that you showed a picture of in the tub, she's ready. And then I used that same male. So I'm going leopard to leopard. Let's do it. And she laid 15 eggs and absolutely replicated what she looked like coming out of the egg. Like I reproduced the color, the pattern, and there was a bunch of them in there. Well, there's only 15, but there was a bunch percentage wise. And so that
I was
just
gonna
like,
say, do you know how many greens you hit?
so in that one, I think it was only like 3 greens.
Perfect. See, that's how like the breeding gods kind of work in your favor, right? Like only 3 in that case, so that's less than what you were expecting from there, whereas
Right.
the other clutch pumped out way more.
The odds like over time equal
Right.
out, right?
Yeah, I wonder, but it's
Yep.
you never
I
know.
think you're right. It's like if you flip a coin and you get like heads 10 times in a row, the next flip, it's still 50-50.
Right.
But if you do it 100 times, it's going to even out. But anyway, so yeah. So again, going back to what is leopard, again, I'm working with that real light hypo. So that was in there, and we're starting to get a little rhythm here of what we could predict to see. So that's a green from the first clutch.
I remember when I went to Snakes on Sunset and I got my first Burmese Python. I remember my parents would take me every weekend. I caught the berm bug, and they did draw the line in the sand, and they told me no, but I wanted a green. I wanted a green really
Cool,
bad.
man.
And back then, this was.
I was gonna say, how much were they going for back then?
Yeah, this was 2004. No, not even. I think it was $250.
No kidding.
Yeah,
They're not that old. Well, all of them, like the first, morph was like
2000,
90.
yeah, 2004, 2003 is roughly around that time, and they were $250, and I bought my I think my normal berm was 95.
Wow, dang, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably when they back had like the warehouses of them, just farm breeding them.
Right,
Oh, yeah.
probably.
But yeah, so that's one of the weird hypos that came out. So the next year I repeated the pairing, got the same results. That was 22. And then this random, retained sperm clutch this year kind of popped out. So going into leopard, there was a time, so going back to the guy who said he thinks it's like a lineage thing and not so much the het green thing. And but I was only working I don't have granite or anything. I had some labyrinth, but never came through with that. But it at one time in the ball pythons, when pieds first came out, we're talking about ball pythons now, so there is a leopard in ball pythons. They thought all leopards were het pied, and they thought it was associated. But it's just when the first came in, a pied was bred to a leopard, so it was carrying the het. And so before you get it dispersed to everybody, every leopard is het until people start out crossing that leopard or that gene, and then you find out it's not associated with it. So at one point I had thought, well, maybe we think it's associated with green because it just is very visual and representative in that green. So then go to this. So the last clutch, again, so she's weird. She has a late cycle. I got her from a guy. She laid in October, and then he sold her. And so I usually pair her like July, August, September, might go to October. Had bred her for a couple years, nothing. And then so paired her, and then they passed the law in December 22. So I didn't pair her this year. Berm life is over. It is what it is. And then she stops eating. And I'm like, that's weird.
Man.
Like
I don't like how you casually said that. Berm life's over. Like, man, that makes me upset.
Yes. Well, especially when these
Why
pop
he's
out,
wearing his USARK shirt, Lucas.
Right. Yeah, I know that they went to bat and tried. He actually Phil actually met with Georgia DNR, him and an attorney.
I'm sure.
So they actually did everything that they could. But so she stopped eating, and she'll, like, when you walk by, she'll pop the glass ready to eat. So that was weird. And then I'm like, you're not eating and you're thick, what's going on here? And I was like, tell me you're not going to lay, right? I've bred you for years and nothing happened, and now when I'm not allowed to and I can't do anything with these, you're going to give me something. And so her babies came out, and I had bred her over the years. I tried a hypo, so half would have been hypo. I tried a green, so you would have had some greens in there. And then at one point in the years, I had put an albino with her, so all the babies would be all albino. So unless these clutches are split, which would be weird to have split clutch and retained sperm,
right? That'd
be pretty
crazy.
Yeah, right. But weird stuff happens like that. I wouldn't be surprised, especially with me. But every baby was albino. And then when they came out, so the first one, I was like, holy cow, this thing's incredibly striped. Like it's a full stripe down its back. And I'd never seen that. And I'm expecting to see the circular leopard stuff, right? Because I don't know. Oh, I didn't say that. She was a leopard, albino leopard, het granite from the original leopard female that started everything for me. So that's probably an important part of this story.
Do you still have that female, by the way?
No. So
No.
the original, when I got her, she was like 15, 16 years old.
Oh, so she's,
and then she ended up, she passed like after the 17, that next year, she ended up passing.
Wow.
Yeah. So that, again, going to these projects, stuff like that can happen. We're like, now you got to raise up your baby. So you got to wait 2 more years to even get somewhere on this. But so the albinos that came out were the first one was striped. I was like, wow, that's crazy. That's pretty cool. Then the next one came out striped. And I'm like, what is this? Next one came out striped. And it was crazy. Oh yeah, that's the hypo, that light lineage of hypo. They look crazy.
That's the pet berm that I want.
Yeah, that'd be a good one to have. There's probably one out there somewhere. But anyway, so getting to what is leopard, and if for everybody's hanging on to the story, thank you, because I know it was a long one. But what I found, so the male that I used was albino het lab. Well, the male that I used, I bought in 2015 as a female. That was triple het. So now it's a male that we proved 2 of the hets to not exist, but it is het lab, because these animals came out with this insane stripe. And I'm talking, man, 70% of it had this, and I'm not talking about a little bit of stripe. I'm talking about half the body, full straight, just amazing stripe. And what sucks is I associated leopard with the het green, the circular reduced pattern, but it looks like what that guy had originally said. It's the lineage of this animal that allows these hets to really push through to the surface. And it makes me wonder if my really light hypos is albino pushing its way through the hypo and really brightening it and really expanding it.
That's like a cheat code right there on like PeachStatePythons clutches.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure.
That's
right.
a cheat code, dude.
Yeah.
Like the super bright ones being yellow, the stripe ones being labyrinth, the circular ones being green. Are you kidding?
Yeah. And and I never expected that. And it really it's how you work these projects. So had I been able, of those babies, because albinos are classic and they're beautiful, but it can be outside of like 2 or 3, they can kind of get hard to move because they kind of look the same. So I knew I was in trouble when I had all albinos, but then when they came out, these are like the best albinos I've ever produced in my life.
That's why I wanted one.
Yes,
and I literally messaged you like I don't know,
I'll go
a week too late.
Right now.
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
I wanted one so bad, because it's one thing to like, my favorite phenotypic expression of Burmese Python albinos are the ones that retain a lot of the pink. You could see the pink on the eyes. You could see the pink on the blushing on the body.
Right.
And when I saw these babies, I was like, these babies are freaking pink. I was like, I need one. And I messaged you about them. I messaged you about them, and you're like, sorry, can't sell them anymore. And I was like, but dude, they're so cheap. I want one.
And I could like 30 hours ago.
Right.
It was
exactly.
Crazy. And it's just so getting in leopard, I don't know what leopard is, but it is, it can really, and really what fires me up about any animal that I'm working with and breeding is really that opportunity to really make something that looks different and really separate your animals from others, and not in like a better aspect, but in kind of like we talk about Shane Sunfires. Like you can look and be like, I bet Shane produced that.
Yeah.
Right.
And
almost every time.
I love being able to like make a normal that pops up and it's just like, it looks different, and really just creating just new looks. And it really depthens what you can do with the berms, because there isn't a ton. Now there's some new, I guess there's pieds and there's some caramel, but I guess there isn't much else here. So there's not a lot you can do with them. So
I'm pretty close with Travis with TK Exotics, and he works with a line of caramels that are pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
But you know
and
what?
Just making it better over time.
And I think that, see, the Retic industry was so focused on, you know, world's first with everything, because there's no shortage of what you can get with Retics, right? Like with
Right.
Burmese, like you said, for a long time it was limited to 4 or 5,
Yep.
you know, morphs. But with Retics, it's never ending.
Right.
And I think where we need to go, and I think we're finally starting to get there, is taking a one morph or 2 morph animal and taking it to the next level.
Right.
And you know, Shane has done it from the beginning. And there are other people that are slowly starting to work into that direction. But I think that's, you know, I understand what you're saying. Like, it's not about like, you know, the money aspect or like, oh, mine's better. But at the same time, you know, it's cool to be able to make something different, but at the same time, from a business perspective, at least in the Retic world, where it's very oversaturated because they can
Right.
produce clutches of 40, right?
Right.
You got to separate yourself somehow, and that's the way to do it. It's no longer the world's first game. It's about, let me make the sexiest motley that
That's
you've
right.
ever seen, right?
Right.
Or
Let me refine this thing down to what excites me about these little
Right.
weird babies in the clutch. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. The odd things that are there, like what I've found with the Retics, and what's really gotten me fired up and really focused on those is het genetic stripe. What it does to animals, it just really kind of brightens them and brings this color out. So I feel like I want het GS in everything, because it just,
Right.
even just a single motley that's het genetic stripe, like the colors on the sides are just glowing. It's just brighter. And so just really, what can you do? And that's what I did with the Burms. Like, how far can I take this and how nice can I make it look without actually making the visual? How can I use this heterozygous
Right.
to make this better
And
and
that's
different?
that's what Chris McVicker's doing now with Citron, which is het titanium.
Yes.
Citron
And that works.
Yeah, Citron is
For
beautiful.
Sure. It does. Yes.
But no one has taken Citron and has perfected Citron, and that, I guess that's what Chris's mission is.
Because it's
now.
just het titanium. It's
Yeah,
just
it's
het
all it is.
titanium.
Yeah.
It's not
That's all-
anything. But I've had because I did a clutch with a Citron, and I had the Machino Motley, and 2 of them next to each other, and you could tell which one's Citron, and it's popping, buddy.
I guarantee you, if you take a Citron Sunfire to a regular Sunfire side by side, you'll know the difference very
For
easily.
sure.
That
Yep.
orange is going to pop.
Yep.
But that it kind of goes back to Granite Back with Anthrax in the Retic
Yeah.
game. That used to be
I love it.
an amazing thing back in the day, but no one focused on it. And then
Right.
Granite Back started disappearing.
Right.
And then Sean McMillan 2 seasons ago, and then Andrew Acevedo and Rodney, who I was consigning the clutch for them, they both took Anthraxes into Superdorf and made these Granite Back Superdorfs that look better than any marble Superdorf you've ever seen. So it's like the Superdorf brought back the Granite Back look, and I hope people really want to just like hammer it down and work with it.
Just refine that. Yeah. And then all that locality Retic stuff, it really does.
Oh, it takes
really,
it to the next level.
It makes it look different, and then you can just work with that. And so that's what the Burms are kind of lacking too, is you don't have the little
Locality
nuances
aspect,
of
yeah.
a locality, right? But there's still so much you can do with it. And you know, who's to say that like this leopard that came about in the 90s at Daytona show wasn't some type of locality that just kind of died off, you know?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Right. It might not be locality differences like as far as like Sula all the way to like the Maluku Islands, right? But there are microclimates and micro ecosystems within a given place that can change the phenotypic expression of an animal.
Like corn snakes look different, like Okiti, and is just a hunt club.
Right.
And then they look totally different from like 400 miles away in Georgia.
Yeah,
right?
it
So the
doesn't
same thing
take
can
that
happen.
much distance.
Or yeah, same thing
And
with A-Rocks,
significantly
right?
different.
You have Sri
Right.
Lankans, and then you have your typical A-Rocks, and the
right.
blushing on the Sri Lankans look crazy.
That's right.
That's
right.
So I'm going to let Nathan kind of lead this one to dive into husbandry aspects of Burmese Pythons. And then I want to kind of wrap us up towards the end about kind of the comparison on your take on differences.
I mean, we talk about retics on this podcast constantly, so I guess contrasting the husbandry of a reticulated python could be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Well, it could be. However, I keep them the exact same. So
Okay.
I keep my
that's
balls.
easy.
Yeah, right. So I keep my ball pythons, berms, and retics all the same. I will say that. So I had berms first. As I started getting the retics, the Retics will hang on the cooler side a little more than the Burms. The Burms like to be a little warmer, but I keep, it's a 6-foot cage, so the gradient's there. But yeah, so I keep it like that 86, 87, 88 on the hot spot, and then the cool side will be in that high 70s.
Cool.
So I do notice that the Retics hang on the cooler side more often, and the Burms like to hug the heat, but they still move around. But yeah, I keep them the same, feed them the same. I've recently switched to cocoa over the paper, and they do really well in that. So I wish I had like some cool differences there, but I keep them the exact same, and they breed the exact same and everything.
I asked you this via message, but I figured we'd bring it out there. I had the question of, because I inquired about that animal, and then I asked your thoughts on, I keep my Retics and my chondros, Indonesian species that I keep in my garage. I keep them, anywhere between 79 and 84 degrees ambient, right? And the daytime highs and lows, and it's kind of replicating that aspect. Would a Burmese Python be okay with that like 82 to 83 average ambient without a hotspot?
So I would think so. If you think about Florida, I mean, it obviously gets hotter, but that low 80s, mid 80s is pretty consistent. I've always had the warmer spot, so I can't speak a ton on that, but I would say that wouldn't be an issue.
Just to keep, maybe not necessarily to breed, but yeah, I was
right.
wondering about
That's
that.
what I was gonna say.
Right.
Like sometimes these animals will do really well in that high 80s, but they're not going to breed. They'll thrive, they'll be healthy, they'll grow, but you need that cool to breed. And so this is my basement, and it does the same thing. So I don't adjust the thermostats, but in the summer it'll be high 70s in here, and then as it gets to the winter, you'll have this like real gradual cool off to like 70, sometimes 68 in the room, and that's what really triggers the cycle.
Yeah.
So they like that swing. And if you think about like, obviously they're breeding and stuff in Florida. I mean, it can get 50, 60s there pretty normally.
They yeah, exactly. They also have weeks that get into the low 40s, and
right.
It's sometimes, it doesn't happen every single year, but they'll have a week or two where it's in the upper 30s.
Right. And then that makes them produce very well. So you need that cool. And I think that temperature that you're kind of saying is probably ideal.
I mean, I breed my Retics like amazing. They breed amazing here in my ambient temperatures. Average year round is 82, 83, but like right now we're going through the beginning of the cold year, and there are nights where I'll put the heater on like a very low setting, and I'll let the ambient get down to like 76.
Really?
And then I let it climb back up, and that's without a hot spot, and that's what typically triggers them to cycle.
I have a buddy in Georgia who he has a building out back, and that's in the fall. He just opens the windows and lets it cool, lets that temp drop, get in there, and that really gets them going.
Yeah, temp cycling is definitely, I think, my preferred. I've done both temp and feeding. But I've noticed this year I've had some females want to cycle like the moment we had rain in a like temperature decrease.
Yeah, interesting.
And I feel like with Retics at least, probably. I mean, no, Burms too. I mean, the obesity thing is a real thing, right?
Yes.
So anytime we can try to not food cycle, I think is
right.
Advantageous for their life.
Yeah, I definitely do.
Sorry, other Utah breeders told me breed when the snow starts. Like,
right.
Same thing.
It's probably pretty early in Utah.
Well,
right.
No,
right.
It's just
May,
starting
June.
right now.
Oh, is it? Oh, really?
Yeah.
I guess because it's drier.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Oh, fair.
Yeah. So I definitely there's definitely I have had my animals, Burms and Retics, cycle when. So I do kind of pick up feeding in the summer, but not to like a egregious manner, more just to make sure they are ready to roll. Not necessarily a feeding type cycling, but that's interesting you said that, because I didn't know people actually did a feeding cycle, but I did notice like if you keep them, you kind of ramp it up and then drop it off, they do actually that does actually help.
Yeah, I mean with Retics, I've done something that's worked for me the last few years that Garrett Hartle kind of told me about, but you give them like a 2-month drought where you feed them like a smaller meal once a month for 2 months, And so they're savages around that time. And then after that, you pound them with bigger, heavy meals once a week. And, you know,
Interesting.
typically within a month, they'll shut down and, you know, slow down dramatically and start to,
Huh.
you know, that's when once you notice that they're no longer, like, you can open up the enclosure and they're not looking at you for food. That's typically when you could start introductions.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Cause that's so the berms and breeding, you don't, so like, let me contrast that. The retics, I just ended up getting some were given, and it was just kind of a weird scenario on how I got them. But yeah, they just decide not to eat one day, and they're crazy feeding response. And I was like, what is that? And then somebody told me, oh, she's cycling.
Yeah.
So the retics tell you, like, you could put a male in there, and if they're not cycling, nothing's happening. But if they turn down food and you put one in there, they're locking up and it's going down.
You see the arching,
absolutely.
you see the stupid.
Yeah, it's crazy. And that's really nice because it's such a clear indicator. With the berms, they continue to eat until they're gravid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you're just pairing, hoping something happens. And if they never turn down food, then they just didn't cycle that year. So you never really know. You just got to kind of learn their cycle and make sure you're going around that time. And so going back to that girl that laid this year, like, I had no idea. And so I had paired her the year before, but she just kept eating. So
now, we talk
weird.
about male retics getting a little bit antsy during the breeding season. Do male berms do the same thing? Yes,
opposite.
Very antsy.
Oh, opposite.
I like that description. Yeah. So berms are chill anyway. They're pretty laid back. But I did have that the really light hypo that I really started working with. The original one was, I mean, he was mean. He'd bite and he hated you. But in breeding season, he was more than happy and just pleasant as could be to get him out and move him, because it's like he knew what was going down. So it's crazy. So like, he definitely became calm and tolerable when you started pairing. So in that breeding season, when they started cycling, he was cool. As soon as they're done cycling, he's striking, he's musking, he's pooping on you. It was pretty crazy. So it's actually the opposite with the
That's so
with
funny.
the berms.
I wish we had that luxury, because mine's kind of weird all year round, and especially around this time of year.
A little sketchy, yeah.
I have a wild caught calato in my garage, and I took him out today to clean, and I had my helper there, and someone else was over, and it took me 7 minutes to get him back in his enclosure because he's sliding along the tub, he's arching on me.
Gosh.
When I put him in the cage, he's spurring the bottom enclosures with his tail, like when he's hanging down, spurring the bottom enclosures, and he would go limp, so I couldn't really put him in, and then he would come back out. Like, he was so weird.
That's crazy.
He really wanted to breed, and I'm lucky for being a wild caught. I'm lucky that I never once thought he was gonna bite. He was just acting weird as hell, arching and bumping his body up against mine, spurring my arm again. Like, I'm like, what is going on?
Pretty cool.
Yeah, but so let me ask you this: as far as husbandry goes, temperatures, you said fairly the same. I'm assuming they're a large constrictor. Feeding wise, do you notice metabolism differences between the two?
No.
Do you feed any less or more with one or the other?
No, so pretty much the same. And let me take that back. I said pretty much the same. So don't notice much difference there at all.
What's their hot spot? 80, you said 86 to 88, 89?
Yeah. So that's what I keep the warm. Generally I see them, like, when I temp gun the snake, they're usually at 84.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, husbandry wise, I'm trying to think if there's, I mean, that's kind of really anticlimactic here.
And that's why it's easy for you to transition.
I didn't
to get
expect
one.
much,
right?
In terms of husbandry differences. I've always been told just keep them the same as you would keep a ball python.
There's some pretty different, like, they're from pretty different places of the world, though.
Right.
That in terms of a ball python, yes.
Well, yeah, but like, okay. So I guess for you, like, is it okay for me to ask you if you prefer one over the other?
Oh yeah, by all means.
Go for it.
Oh, that was it. All right, we're gonna have a build up.
What a question.
So they they each have their own value in their own special way, and so it actually not trying to be diplomatic, is hard to rank one over the other. I love the Retics and really enjoy them and the variety they bring. I do like that you can almost like play with the Retic because they move a lot.
Yeah.
But I also like that
you.
right. But the berms, I do like that they just kind of hang out. So there isn't an edge. If I Matt Bowers have to pick one, it is the berms, just more so for my story and how I came about and what got me into doing this and what made Peach State Pythons was the berms. But so I got my first retic. My brother had two, and then he moved to Florida, and so he gave me his. And it was a male and a female, and the male had gotten up to size where he could breed. And I was like, all right, well, if you're going to be here, you got to pay rent. So I got like just a golden child het albino that I rounded up for fairly cheap just to make some kind of simple combos because that's what I really like in the retics. And then somehow somebody's like, hey, I got this other one. Do you want it? And I was like, okay. And then a guy that was in he had a really good collection, John DeMiglio. He had gotten out. Yeah. You know him, okay? Yeah. So he lived 45 minutes and kind of built a relationship with him. And he was like a snob. He only got the best of the best from the best. And when he needed some space, he'd be like, hey, do you want this, Mochino Motley that Sal Daddy produced? And I was like, how much? He'd be like, well, just come get it, man. And so like I ended up getting that. Right. And then, the next thing you know, like he'd send me, I'd see him in my inbox, like, damn it, this dude's going to have me take another snake. I'm running out of room, but you can't say no because it's such good deals. And then
you just start not opening his messages.
Right. Like
I'm out of cage space, dude.
And then one time he sent me a message and it said, all I could see was, hey, I'm thinking about getting out. I have a really good, proposition for you or something like that. And I was like, gosh, dang it. You're about to make me take your whole collection. And so I didn't open it for a minute. I opened it up and sure enough, he got out and I acquired all of his snakes, all his animals. And so that's kind of how I got into retics. So I absolutely love them. And I have a ton of fun with them. And I like to see where it can go. And I do enjoy them. And so it's hard to rank. But if I have to pick, Peach State Pythons is built on the berms. And then the whole like story that I walked everybody through on what is leopard and it ended up being like a biography of me.
Right.
That's why, because just that passion, that vision of what the leopard was and how it came about and what I fought through to get to have it in my hand. I like the berms, but not for any reason for anybody deciding between the two should go off of.
Oh, for sure.
They're great, So it's a tough question, but just for our discussion's sake.
It's understandable. It's what impacts you the most.
And I really wish there were more people and maybe there are, but we just don't see them on Facebook often or engage in social media, but like it takes a special type of breeder to have that stick-to-itiveness that you did with the Leopard project. And
well, thank you.
I think that, sadly, I think what COVID did was it brought a lot of new potential breeders in that saw a lot of money signs.
Right.
Because they saw that prices went up and people were buying a bunch of animals and, I want to buy this, I want to buy that, and I'll breed them together. And if they have 30 babies at $2,000 a pop, I'll make, $60,000 and right.
It's like that.
It is. I mean, even, in my mind, I crunch some numbers like that sometimes because, I'm also trying to get bigger enclosures and I'm trying to plan out my expenses for the year. Right.
Right.
But people like you that have been doing this for a while and you see something, you go after it and you don't stop until the government is like, you have to stop.
Right.
I can appreciate that.
Thank you.
There's not a lot of people that are I mean, how many people do you know that are like, yeah, I'm going to go after this double recessive project and they're only on like year 6 and they sell the project. Right.
Right. Yeah.
And that's not even like trying to isolate a different look takes more than 6 years. Right?
Yes, it does.
There's no time frame. Like when you're working with a double recessive or triple recessive project, you can kind of map it and plan it out.
That's right.
You didn't have a map. You were just like,
no idea.
Every single clutch, you're like, okay, here's what I'm looking at. What's different? What's new?
Here's
Yep.
the shift.
Yeah, here's the
Uh-huh.
shift. There's not a lot of people that even get the opportunity to do that, let alone would follow through with it.
Appreciate
So
that.
yeah, that's awesome.
Noticing that. Yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna go off of I'm gonna get away from the sentimental comments.
Give
Do
me
you
more
have to
therapy.
do you have to tap train your hooks? Did you say I need more therapy?
give me some more of those therapies.
Do you have to tap train? Like, do you reach in and grab your berms? How do you handle it?
No. Yeah. So they are probably not on the level of the retic, but yeah, always with a hook. I used to do the paper towel until I got lost a paper towel roll or two.
Yeah.
They ate it. So
Oh
the
my
hook,
gosh.
yeah, it comes out on the other end.
I've heard of that. I've seen towels being consumed by birds.
Oh man.
It's
Yeah.
which doesn't make sense. Like, why would you just use the hook? So yeah, absolutely, because they know when there's food around, especially like if I have a freezer out in the garage, and so if I will thaw them out in the garage in the summer, and they can smell it in here, and so definitely then. But any other time, because nothing's gonna happen with a hook. You're not gonna be like, dang, I wasted time grabbing this hook, right? But if you
Right.
don't use the hook and you get bit, it's so just always use a hook, no matter what, always. But yeah, definitely need that. They do have a feeding response, but not like probably not on the level of a retic, but some do. Like I said, the girl who laid this, you're like, she'll pop the glass when you walk by, so definitely want to watch her.
One thing I want to make sure we hit on is, it seems that berms really get our eyes more than you see in other snakes.
Or at least in retics. I'll say that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And
how have you dealt with it? Do you feel like there's a husbandry mistake that people are making to cause it? What do you think?
So, when I first got into it, I listened to a podcast of this guy who'd been doing it a while. He doesn't do it anymore. And they asked him this question, and I can't remember who the podcast was, but they said, "Tell us about the berm disease." And I was like, "The what?" And he's like, "Yeah."
It almost seems like that.
Yeah, and so I guess they are prone to getting a respiratory-ish thing. And so it was interesting to hear that, and that's when I was first kind of getting the burns, and I was like, "What is that?" And the guy, I can't remember like what he had said, but he had felt, and he is actually a biologist in Texas, at Texas A&M, I believe, and he had said he feels that they don't move around. So like retics are always like doing something, right? It seems like berms will just hang out. Right. Berms will just kind of sit there, and which is kind of why they're cool, because they're kind of laid back. But he was alleging or feeling that some of that comes from them not moving and getting air. So there's this air in this
pneumonia.
lung. Yeah, like it gets stagnant back there.
Okay.
So they do get it, but they don't get a respiratory. Like if you have retics, don't get that ever. I don't think, because they're freaking tanks. I had a retic get out.
It takes a lot. It takes a lot.
I had one get out day after Thanksgiving, and I didn't find it till the day after Christmas, and it was in the ceiling. And I was like, this thing's gonna be sick. This thing's it was fine.
That was your video I saw on the internet circiding around.
Did you see that?
The two massive ones that fell through the
that's
ceiling.
what I'm talking about.
Oh yes, right. I didn't see that. But anyway, I was like, this thing's gonna be sick. This thing was fine. But berms they're prone to that. But like, if you've ever had, so the ball pythons will get it sometimes, and it's like they're miserable. They can't breathe. They can't move. They don't eat. Retic or the berms, whatever they get, it's there's some like a loogie type thing, but they're fine. They act normal. They eat. They poop. They shed. They're fine. But they just get this thing, and so having discussion with other berm people who have had that experience, I've heard of it not being humid enough, so they're producing this mucus, and so then they overproduce it. Nerd did a video. Well, so that's the obvious thing, but I wouldn't say that's it, because I've experienced it and the temps are fine.
Okay.
But Nerd did a video a couple years ago, and I think they were comparing retics and berms, and he brought out a granite berm, Kevin did, and it had that, and he had mentioned it. He's like, yeah, they get this loogie thing. They're fine, but they get it. And so that's kind of what it is. Like, they're fine, but it's not pleasant sounding. So I don't think it's temps. We felt like, not humid enough. So they're producing that mucus. It could be that air circulation. It could be circulation in the room. It's not like your snake's going to die at 7 foot type thing. It doesn't happen a lot, but it happens more than I don't know if I've ever had a retic really get sick. But the Burms will, but then they get over it. So I don't know. So it's tough, but there is something. And then the other part of that is like, okay, DNR, these Burms get this thing that causes this loogie. Are you onto something? Is that the lung parasite they're talking about? I don't know.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but so if that's what you had heard, I mean, that is something that happens, but it's not an RI. It's weird.
Okay.
Because RIs make them sick, but they're not sick.
That's a good point for me. I had no idea. I always thought it was RI.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I think that my concern with the whole ambient thing was just like if it got too low in temps, would that create an RI and those kind of things? But I mean, again, it seems like they're doing okay in Florida, and then during the winter it gets
right. Is that what it is?
Right.
Is it the constant temperature that maybe they need it to change? But that's where I go back to like potentially the humidity thing, because they sit in the swamps.
Yeah.
And Florida's super humid.
Yeah.
And
nonstop.
It may happen in winter, so we're thinking temps, but the air dries out in winter. So, but I don't know. There's a lot of theories out there.
It's interesting the mucus thing that you brought up. I have a buddy here in Utah that rescued a Burm from a house fire, and he had to do all sorts of stuff to make sure this snake survived. But one of the things was at one point, whether it be the smoke inhalation or whatever this snake went through, he had to suck mucus out of the cloaca to help it breathe.
Hold up. Someone sucked out of a snake's cloaca?
Yep, this is Richard Bilbo.
Damn, Richard. That guy was my
end?
hero in the first place. And
like with a pen or something. I can't remember what he said he used, but it didn't sound pleasant.
Wow. Out of the cloaca?
I don't, or not out of the cloaca. What am I saying?
Nostril or
no,
you're talking about the glottis?
No, I am just speaking too fast.
Okay.
And
okay, because I gotta
oh
find
my
out
god,
how he did
that
that.
would be
That's all.
hilarious.
I was gonna say that dude's
you gotta suck real hard.
Okay, but yeah, the mucus thing. It comes out of the throat.
Had to open the snake's mouth out, suck mucus out to enable this snake to breathe after all of that it went through.
That's great. I can imagine extending the snake and just.
Oh my god, that's funny.
That's one. Yeah, just get it right out the back end. But so that would be consistent with what you see. It's like this mucus, but it's not that overall sickness. It's weird. Yeah, from a loogie.
Man, I'm trying to think of other husbandry aspects, but you're grabbing them with a hook. Temperatures are around the same that you'd keep a retic, which I feel like 95% of snake species out there you can keep with a hot spot of 86 to 88 and the ambient to mid to upper 70s, and you're golden. Any other things that you think are drastically different, at least from retics, that you want to share, or I guess like if someone is going to want to keep a Burm for the first time, those kind of tips and things that you want to share?
So not a lot of drastic differences. So it's a real good, if you have retics and you just want something different, you can plug a Burm in and be just fine. First time owners, they're pretty easy to keep. I mean, I would keep in mind the potential for the whatever that loogie thing is, but it doesn't happen a lot, but it can happen. But as far as like keeping, they're easy. They don't have to be huge. That hypo leopard that you showed that has laid 2 very healthy clutches for me, she's maybe 7 foot and maybe like this big around. That's like just a nice manageable snake. So I don't have any of those giants. I have a 2017 male that he's 5 foot, and so I don't have to be huge.
It's not a prog shy.
It's not. But it's Like, hang on a second. Hang on one second. I'll grab you one. I'll show you. Just talking about size.
Yeah, I will say that Phil has a decent aged Burmese Python at his place, and they're not. I feel like it's almost the same as mainland retics right now. Like, unless you intentionally are pushing and trying to get them big, they can be manageable.
That's right. This is a
they'll grow slow with you. It almost
this
seems
is a
like.
Shut up.
2020 female.
Shut up.
Yep. And so, she's still got nice thickness to her, but not
how
giant.
often do you feed?
Once a week.
Stop.
Yep. So just like a large rat once a week.
Yeah, retic a mainland retic's much bigger than that in 3
So,
years.
yeah, they don't have to be
yeah.
huge. And you think like I wouldn't, but age wise, technically be breeding, I'd let her get a little bigger. But yeah, so just an idea of what you're looking at. I know there are like conceptually people thinking that they get huge, but this is pretty manageable,
they're
man.
definitely heavier body than retics, but
Yeah.
But
How tall are you for reference?
So I am 5'11".
Okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
I'm the same
Jeez.
height, so that's pretty good for me.
Same.
yeah, right. And this is so it'd be like, so this is 3.5 years old because it'd be summer of
Yeah, I mean for
20.
in mainland terms, I mean that's year and a half for most,
Right.
male
Yep.
or female.
What were the was that an albino green?
That was an albino green, yes, sir.
Look at me. I'm
Yeah, nailed it. And I used a hook.
there you go.
Good job.
Was that a
Using our
Venom live
tools.
hook?
No, I don't.
What
This
is
is
this?
probably, I don't know what this one is. Generic
Generic.
reptile basics, maybe.
That's that Amazon.com hook.
Yes, very effective. So that might be something to keep in mind. I mean, we had talked previously a little bit about getting hatchlings started.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that surface back up. Yeah,
unpack that. They're not tough. So retics,
real quick,
blew my mind.
For everyone listening, we were having a conversation before, and Matt had the audacity to say that it's easier to get a Burmese hatchling started eating than it is a retic. And if you know retics, you know that they will eat your finger if you let them. So I want to hear this.
And yeah, unless, so my first retic clutch, so I had done ball pythons and berms, and then I had a retic clutch, and they went months. And I had to message somebody, be like, hey, what's going on with these things? Do they eventually eat? What do I need to do? I mean, I've had them go like 4 months, retics, without eating. And then just one day they just decide. And then, I mean, I'm talking, it gets sketchy. And then, you do a little bit of assist feeding just to make sure they get some nutrients. But the berms are pretty easy. I'll tell you this, the easiest snake to get started that I've ever worked with, well, bull snakes. I had a bull snake like hatch, and it ate 2 hours later.
Whoa,
But yeah, that's pretty
insane.
crazy. Yeah. But the second easiest is ball pythons. They eat so easy, which I wouldn't think because they can be kind of picky.
You're gonna
Berms would be
lose
next.
all credibility here soon, man.
sometimes you just need a little something smaller. But the berms, they can be pretty easy, but you can always go to chicks. They'll eat chicks like whenever you need them to, which is generally what I start on anyway because they're cheap and they're a little bit bigger and
Dude,
meatier,
so
so you can kind of
cheap.
get them to yeah, they're so cheap.
I got like 300 chicks in my freezer right now.
Really? There you
Yes.
go. So you get, it's cheap. You get a little more meal in them, so they get established quicker. But there's for some reason, some people don't like when they're on chicks, so I try not to. I don't know. I think it's just like it's been passed around that it's not good, but I love using chicks, and I use chickens with the berms and with the retics. It's nice. The poop's real easy to clean. So I'm a huge fan of the poultry. But anyways, the berms, yeah, so they're not super hard to get started. They can take a little bit, and then just pull out a chick, and they'll usually go to town on it. But the retics are a pain in the butt, man.
Yeah,
They are like, they can be stressful.
yeah. I was sharing that all of my F1, F2 clutches of my locality stuff have eaten no problem, but I've only done one mainland pairing with morphs involved, tiger and ocelot, and half the clutch took 3 months to eat. And I was getting, I swear I saw gray hair in my beard. I was like, what the
that's
hell
normal.
is happening? So, and I know Nathan has had a nightmare year with his clutch.
Yeah, I mean, it was about half the clutch didn't want to eat for the first few months, regardless of what you offered, how you offered. Yeah, it was a nightmare. Luckily, most of that is past. So
yeah, that's consistent with all my Retic clutches.
I will say my Retic clutch, the mainland clutch, I was like just getting frustrated, and just decided to slap the Retic with the chick that I had dangling in front of it, and that got it to eat. Like I slapped it and then offered it again, and it ate it.
I had one or two that was like that too.
Yeah, so that's actually a trick
it.
I learned in the berms is you take that chick and you like push them with it, kind of shake it, and they're like trying to get away, and then just something triggers them and they wrap it up. But yeah, that's like you got to like agitate them, and they're like scared, don't know whether to bite, be afraid.
I guess they agitated me, so I agitated them back, and they took it. Like I literally had it like this.
That had to have been how that technique was developed.
Right?
There's no other explanation.
No, I'm only doing this because I love you.
Right, exactly. I was literally bouncing it back and forth. I would hit the face. It did nothing, and then I literally was just like whack, and it turned around and bit it. And I was like, "All right, well, you're pissed, so you took it.
Pissed it off, right?"
Matt, can you? I first and foremost, thank you so much for coming on. We kind of at the end, if you have any last things that you want to say, if not, if you want to kind of tail in, where can people find you online, and follow you? And then, also if you want to leave off, I know that you can't, you're done with kind of the berm. So what's next for Matt?
Yeah, that's a good question there.
Betafish.
So yeah, so this beta thing's really got me intrigued. So really just learning about those. No, so I don't know. So that's the beauty of it, right? Is I don't know what's next, and what's next, well, I'll kind of find along the way. I do have some, other species. I have some king snakes and bull snakes. I have some locality boas that I'm growing up. But I think kind of the beauty in it, if I can, is I don't know what's next.
Cool. And
I'll be led in that direction. And like I said, like you got to always try to welcome these changes. Be frustrated because you worked hard, and it's okay to feel that way, but being led to something that you never would have found had you been stuck on this berm leopard thing. So I'm optimistic that that's going to happen at some point. And if it just so happens to be this really incredible beta setup here, that's where I'm led. That's the where I'll go. But
I can't wait to see it. And man, that's one hell of an attitude you have given the circumstances.
Thank you. And yeah, sometimes you just don't have much of a choice.
I'm sure it's been stages.
Yeah, you know what? And it's like, yeah, it is what it is. And this clutch came out. I'm like, gosh, dang it, this is so stupid. But yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, and then to find me, Instagram's probably the easiest way. PeachStatePythons, Instagram. That's where I can be most responsive. And sometimes I'm not too active on the Facebook, but you could probably round me up there. But yeah, PeachStatePythons on Instagram is probably the easiest way. If you did have any questions or want to talk further, just want to see all the cool stuff we're talking about, that's probably the easiest way. And then as far as like just overall, I think we covered a lot of it. I know we spent a lot of time on this, that one kind of like direction I was going, and what is that leopard, but I'm
happy we did.
Yeah, well, good. It felt good to get that out there. But there's a lot of like really cool more. So there's a lot of really cool things happening right now as people are working with the pied stuff that's here. And just, I think that'll open up a lot of things. So anybody who is looking, I know I spoke on there only being like 4 or 5 more. So there's, with the pieds, as we saw with the retics, learning what each additional gene does with the pied, it's really neat to see. And I think we'll get a lot of that in the berm. So it's a really kind of exciting time to keep that going. And there's a lot of people like labyrinths becoming more prominent, which is just like, it varies so much. That's going to be really cool, something to watch. So if anybody is watching this interested in berms, there's a lot that's going to be happening in the future as people are getting new bloodlines and just working and crisscrossing things. It's going to be really cool to watch. And maybe some of my stuff's out there floating. I know there was a breeder who got a pair for me out of this, and I made sure to pick him like handpick him what I would keep so that he can kind of keep this going and do
Awesome.
something with it. Yeah. So there's gonna be some people out there, hopefully, carrying on what I kind of got going and buy into my concepts. But yeah, I think we covered a
that
lot of
they're
it.
open and willing to kind of have you coach and they consult with you, because I would hate for this to completely stop where you're at. And so I'm really hoping that those people are willing to continue.
Well, what's really unfortunate is there's another guy who breeds Burms who kind of goes along the same lines as what I'm doing, and it's Black Diamond Herps, Aaron Mathis,
Yeah.
like my best friend. He was really pushing this labyrinth, and he pushes this like pinstripe, it's tri-stripe looking, it's crazy what he was doing, but he lives in Georgia, so he's in the same boat. So like he was somebody who kind of shared that vision of like, we need to make our stuff look different. And really, you can see if you see a hypo lab with that triple stripe, you can look at it and be like, oh, that's Aaron's, and it is. But there's some people who are really, have that vision and are going to keep it going, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, Matt, man, thank you so much for coming on the short notice. On top of that, it was a pleasure having you on. And
it's awesome.
Yeah, once you start getting back, I'm going to be following the Retic stuff you do, and I'd love to have you on as a guest in the future to talk Retic. So
yeah, it'd be cool. I'd like that. It was a lot of fun, guys, and I definitely appreciate you thinking of me and opening that invitation. It was real easy to accept and get excited about it. Even staying up 2 hours past my bedtime to hang out with you guys.
We appreciate that.
Glad to do it.
Yeah, I know you have the gym and cleaning in the morning, so we'll let you get to it.
Appreciate that.
Take it easy, man.
All right, guys. Thank you.
See you.
All right. See you guys.
There we have it. Burmese Python species spotlight.
Yep.
And on top of that, we got to get some backseat access into something new that he was working with. And I'm not going to lie, man, in the back of my mind, he's handling that Georgia shit way better than I would if anything ever happened with legislation. But it's cool to see, at least publicly, he's handling it very humbly.
Inspiring stuff, from the breedings to the pictures to just the overall attitude about how he keeps in his collection and how he's keeping calm during this storm that they're dealing with down in Georgia.
Yeah.
So fun episode. Another long one, which I always love. I love when our guests get to just sit here, use
when they're
this
amped, right?
Yeah. This is your platform for Species Spotlight. So that's what I love.
It's great.
No, it was a fun one. So you guys, we'll see you if you're on our Patreon. This is dropping probably Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we'll see you guys next Friday for our Patreon meeting. And then Lucas, we'll see you next Friday for another episode of the Retic Clutch.
See you guys.